What's up, everybody? Thrall's Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I am back with yet another collection update. But yeah, once again, I got a batch here of, some stuff I picked up in distro dives, some new releases, some reissues, and definitely a lot of death metal. Like, this is a very death metal-centric collection update. So if you're a death metal fan, you're about to either run into a bunch of bands you already know, or a bunch of bands you don't know and you should definitely check out. Regardless, we're going to get this thing kicked off, and we're going to kick off with Authorize, The Source of Dominion. This is the lone full-length from this Swedish death metal act. Originally it came out in 1991. This is a 2022 Dark Symphonies reissue of it. Really had never heard of this band. I saw the distro, I forget which one. It might have been Pulverized. I don't know, I can't remember. But I jammed some songs, like, hey, this is pretty good. And this isn't like your prototypical Swedish death metal, sound. Like, it's not the HM2 buzzsaw. It's also not Melodeath. This band, I would say, like, a lot of their sound felt more rooted in, like, death and early Pestilence and Morgoth. Like, it was more that straight up old school death metal sound that, you could argue kind of came from the US. Now, it took me a while to really discover the whole, sound being, like, a little bit closer to, like, death and Pestilence, because the opening track, simply called Intro, is definitely an intro. It's also over 3 minutes long of just like spooky soundscapes and shit. And I know I complain about intros all the time, but I think anyone would complain about a 3-minute intro of just like stock Halloween noises. But when it finally kicked in with Silent Nocturne Symphony, this is just like flat out grimy, very thrashy, old school death metal. Very raw production. It sounds gritty. It sounds, just like 90s death metal honestly should. I will say that the mix in here, it's got like some balancing issues. Like at times the guitars do feel a little bit thin. Like they don't have like this big, robust, like thick death metal tone. Again, maybe like a little bit more thrashy. And I do feel like the vocals are like a little bit out front, and occasionally they can kind of drown out the riffs. But as far as the riffs being played, just solid old school death metal riffs, akin to like Benediction. Honestly, like some of this kind of reminds me a bit of Death Breath. And musically, while this is just, very rooted in 90s death metal, because, it is 90s death metal, it kind of should be. There were some interesting moments that kind of stood out in terms of like dynamics. Like occasionally you have like some atmospheric synths every now and then. The title track on here, I don't know, there's a chuggy riff on there that almost kind of sounds like it's a proto slam riff almost. There's also some weird vocal dynamics that happen around God of Christianity. I believe it's the same vocalist the entire time, but the vocals for the most part are kind of like, like a very straightforward death roar from that era, like, kind of chuckish. But on God of Christianity, he shifts to this more agonized, more painful, almost kind of sick delivery. Like, it sounds like there's like a little bit of like phlegm coming up with every growl. And I checked, and I believe it's still the same vocalist on there, but I kind of wonder why they like changed it so dramatically on pretty much just that track. There's also a little bit of that vocal delivery on Mindless as well, but God of Christianity is the one that really stood out for just sounding like it had almost a completely different vocalist. Either that or they made the dude go in when he had like a bad case of laryngitis. Now this does have some issues. There are some like transitions in some of these songs that feel a little wonky and off at times, like very sharp and jagged and kind of like out of nowhere. For the most part, they're pretty smooth, but there are a couple of moments on here that I thought were a little bit off. And I gotta say the lead tone on here is kind of raw and like just not really good sounding. Like it's something good kind of raw. It sounds like they just kind of recorded it with like a shitty tone. Now this does include their lone demo on here, and honestly it sounds pretty damn good. Like, I'm sure this was like remastered and polished and whatnot, but it sounds really good for a 90s demo. Tonally a little bit different, like it's almost more thrash metal on the demo. And in terms of like the songwriting, like Mindless Confusion, the demo version is a lot longer. Like they really kind of draw out the bridge a lot and have a little bit more fun with the rest, but it does feel like it is kind of drawn out, so I can understand shortening it down. But yeah, overall this was pretty good, and I don't know, we might do like a retro review of this one day. Who knows? There might be some like fun stories behind this. I really didn't get into it. But yeah, if you like death, again, like Benediction, a little bit of Obituary here and there, definitely Pestilence and Morgoth, check this out. Pretty solid stuff. Brutally Deceased, Chasms. This is the fourth full length from this Czech I would just say like flat out death metal act, though, I mean, it kind of borders on HM2 death metal because that tone's pretty damn close. And it's got elements of old school death metal and more modern death metal on it, and even occasionally grind, so it's kind of a hodgepodge. This band features former members of Heaving Earth, which is the only band I recognize in terms of like all the bands these guys have been in. But this was a really interesting listen. I kind of blind bought this one. I think it was kind of like just to round out my order to make sure the shipping, yeah, I mean, it was at least justifiable at that point. And yeah, this is just kind of a blend of a lot of different things. Like, again, the guitar tone, it's very sharp, it's very sizzly, it's kind of close to that buzzsaw tone, but it's also very blasty. At points you get those like heavy downpicked, like kind of like punkier riffs too, so there's like a little bit of death grind to it. Vocally, it's kind of a mix of like, you know, straight up death metal roars and like kind of like bellows. Like, I don't know, it's not like a super traditional delivery, I guess you could say at times. The production here, I'd say, is like pretty sleek and modern, but a lot of the music has like, again, like a very classic sense. Like you get a lot of like classic harmonized riffs, but it has that more modern polish to it. And while this is brutal, fast, blasty, and aggressive as hell, there's a lot of melody in here, to the point where I'd say like there's some like almost flat out mellow death-ish songs on here. Deus Monday, Vacant Orb, Nether Realms, there's spots in those songs that have like some more Gothenburg tinged riffs, but it's definitely, again, like more aggressive. So, you know, maybe like Black Dahlia Murder-ish at points. I would say, I don't say, it kind of remind me of like Dimension Zero, which was a, you know, side project of In Flames. Well, all right, In Flames when Jesper was still there and they were still good. Chasmborn in particular in here is a very grindy track. It kind of reminded me a lot of like bands like Cold Worker. Thy Benefactor also stands out as a more groovy, sinister, atmospheric track. A lot more distant melodies on there. And atmosphere is not a big thing in here. A lot of this is just kind of go for the throat at pretty much all times. But I like that this had some like fun wrinkles on it. And I like that this doesn't fit neatly into like one particular like subset of death metal. It's kind of an amalgamation of a lot of different styles, and honestly it works really well. But yeah, if you like bands like Cold Worker, there's definitely some stuff in here that reminds me of like Aborted at times. Again, Dimension Zero kind of popped to my head for a bit. Stuff like that. Check this out. Pretty solid album. Grave Infestation, Carnage Gathers. This is the second album from this Vancouver-based death metal act. Yet another one I guess you could say is kind of a blind buy. I mean, I saw it. It had Dark Descent printed on the back, and I mean, for the most part, I'll pick up most things on Dark Descent because most things in Dark Descent are pretty awesome. But this is one I had never heard of. I checked out a couple of tracks, and I mean, I felt like I kind of had heard of them. This is just swampy, gross, old school death metal. Like, this is the more rotten kind of, you know, putrid sounding death metal you expect from bands like, you know, Cerebral Rot, Autopsy, Witch Vomit. It's got that kind of like wet, swampy sound overall with really just kind of grossly textured melodies kind of scattered across all the just swampy, putrid fucking riffs on here. The production on here is solid for what they're going for. It's definitely got its murk. It's definitely got its kind of, I don't know, filthy, slimy sheen across it, but it's still very, you know, clear sounding. And while having that kind of like festering, rotten sound is definitely a big part of this, still rooted in a lot of just like classic death metal riffs. There's still solid hooks throughout, a lot of like death and obituary and stuff like that. While the vocals I do think are kind of pushed a little too far back at times. Like, I kind of want to hear the theatrics because this guy has a very Ryford-esque delivery. And I love how Ryford just hams it up on every vocal performance. He's like one of my favorite death metal vocalists of all time. This is pretty much just packed with everything I love about like old school death metal. A lot of groove, like a lot of just like gut stomping grooves. Inhuman Remains in particular is a big old nasty standout for some nice chuggy riffs, and again, like just old school kind of grooves. Same thing with the Anthropophagus. Black Widow is a little bit more thrashy. Occasionally you get like those like kind of like punkier riffs that you get with like, you know, a lot of like Autopsy as well. The transitions are solid. The whole album kind of just runs very smoothly in general. Yeah, this is just quality, gross, rotten, disgusting death metal. Very much an easy sell for me. But yeah, if you like, again, Autopsy, Cerebral Rot, Corpus Awful. Corpus Awful's pretty damn similar to this too. And definitely like a little bit of Witch Vomit as well. Check this album out. Pretty gnarly stuff. Korpse, Pull the Flood. This is the debut album from this Scottish progressive death metal act. Originally came out in 1994. This is a 2023 reissue. I had heard about this band years ago, but I just never checked them out, and they kind of popped up in the distro that I got this in. This, again, might have been from Pulverized. They only released 2 albums before breaking up, so this is definitely some retro review material, potentially. And I have to say, this is quite an interesting album. Very unique in a lot of ways. Like, when it comes down to like the death metal elements, it's again like very old school, lots of like Carcass-esque moments on here. But it definitely has its bizarre, quirky songwriting. Like there's transitions between riffs that are very Demolish-esque. Definitely doesn't have the vocals. The vocals are, you know, pretty good, solid roar. But this album also has a lot of like interesting, like non-metallic riffs, but they're being played very aggressively. That's like the best way I can describe it, because you hear some of these melodies on here and some of it kind of screams like 90s alternative, which, I mean, it came out in 1994. This was kind of like the end of death metal's, you know, big run. Actually, it might have been like 1993 where death metal started getting a bit of a downturn. So this was like one of those points where I think the sound needed to grow, and this band pushed in a lot of different directions. Like the atmosphere on here is very strange. Sometimes it's very lush and pretty, and then sometimes they'll throw in some porn samples just for shits and giggles. Lots of cool guitar effects and bass effects by that extension too. So there's a lot of things contributing to the atmosphere as well. The best way I could describe it is I feel like this album kind of stumbles around almost kind of drunkenly between different subgenres, but it's not like bumping into people and starting fights. It's bumping into people and making friends. I don't know. This is a really interesting listen, and I don't know how much more I'm going to go into it, because I kind of do want to do a retro review on this band, because this is one of those weird bands that I would love to expose to either Shred or John, because I think they would probably enjoy them. I have not listened to the second album. I heard that one was a little bit more stripped down, but yeah, this is really just, I don't know, like different. It's interesting. It kind of does a lot of things that are not necessarily in the progressive death metal playbook, but for the most part, I'd say it works. I kind of respect the whole fuck it, let's try it and see if it works sort of ethos on this album. But yeah, in terms of what to compare this to, I mean, again, like Carcass and like Benediction, stuff like that, but also like there's elements of Stoner Doom, there's elements of weird prog, again, like touches of Demolish minus the vocals. It's strange, it's weird, but it's definitely worth checking out. Mvltifission, and that's multi with a V in place of the U for metal reasons, I guess. Anyway, the album is called Reborn Souls from Transcendent, Agony. This is the second album from this Chinese death metal act. Admittedly, I know very little about like the Chinese metal scene at all. I think I have like one other album from a Chinese band, and it's, I don't know, pretty much just like straight up like Bay Area thrash. I think they're called Explosive Cum or something like that, and the cum part is spelled the way you think. Anyway, got another one that I believe was in Pulverized distro that I jammed. I had never heard of this band. In fact, these are like individually gold stamped and numbered on the back. This is copy 166 out of 500. And this is filthy, sludgy, very atmospheric death metal. A lot of like Blood Incantation and Demolish vibes. You have like deep guttural vocals, strange undulating riff combinations that move around like Cthulhu's face. There's definitely some Lovecraftian vibes throughout this, I'm pretty sure of it. The guitars have this kind of like gross like sizzle to them. A lot of atmosphere. There's a lot of like stuff in here that's, you know, kind of like Death Doom-ish. I wouldn't call this entirely Death Doom. It's definitely got, again, like a lot of, you know, like Morbid Angel vibes here and there, but there are moments in here where they get on these big droning riffs, like bands like Coffins or Anatomia. Lots of interesting builds too, like songs will start off very slow and menacing and kind of like creep along a little bit and then explode into like technical blast beat sections. Again, like the Blood Incantation vibes, especially on some of the faster, more like proggy sections, it really kind of comes through here. Eternal Wormed Infection in particular has these twisting, churning riffs, and lead melodies on here are just gross sounding. Like, they're not to accentuate melody, but more so to accentuate the atmosphere and how like dissonant and atonal and twisted all this is. But it works. Like, it works so damn well. The riff work in here is just flat out disgusting, but oddly very catchy. They even pepper in some synths every now and then for some pretty effective atmosphere as well. Haunting curses and saunter through the grotesque. Props on using the word saunter. No one uses that one anymore. But those make good use of like some synthy, just kind of weird textures. It's very much like a horror synth sort of sound, like, you know, very much like a Fabio Frizzi sort of thing, but then blend that with like twisting Demolich riffs. There's also sections of like just heavy, dissonant, like very atonal strumming, and how they harmonize those riffs. It just sounds absolutely filthy. I really enjoyed this. Like, this was, you know, I would say like probably one of my favorite blind buys. I mean, it kind of counts if you listen to a couple of tracks and pull the trigger on it, I guess. That still feels kind of like a blind buy. It's not like the traditional blind buy at a record store where you just like look at the album cover and see the logo, or, you know, see the label they're on. I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'll throw down $15 on that, why not? But yeah, this is awesome, and if there's more like this in China's metal scene, I'm gonna have to check it out. Seems like it might be kind of difficult getting this stuff over here, especially right now, but I do want to look into like some other bands out there, because if they're spawning this sort of like filthy, grotesque awesomeness in their country, I want to check out more. But yeah, if you're a big fan of Morbid Angel, Blood Incantation, regular Incantation too, and again, like a bit of Demolich too, like especially in the riff work, check this out. This album's absolutely amazing. Rothadás, and forgive me because everything is in Hungarian, and we all know I don't speak that. Oh, God, should I even attempt this? Töviskert, kísértés, örök, you know what? If you get that far, and I'm going to copy and paste it down below with the list of all the stuff here, yeah, you know what? Just click the link and you can figure it out. Unless you're Hungarian, then you totally got this. Anyway, this is the second full length from this Hungarian death doom act. I was a huge fan of their debut album and their first demo. And with this album, I think this band just only gets better with each release, because this album is the best thing that they've released so far. And the last album, again, was fantastic, start to finish. But this just kind of refines everything down. I think the production on here, I think, is even better this time. Huge, massive, lumbering guitars, dense as hell. The drums have a great pop to them. Massive roared vocals, and this is the kind of death doom that does like to get more into like death metal territory in terms of like some up-tempo stuff every now and then. It's not all slow and plodding. Big, deep tremolo harmonies, woeful lead melodies. Again, huge cavernous vocals. Songwriting here is top notch. The pace of all the songs, I think, is great. Like, you have time to like, you know, really soak in riffs, and the builds going into like the next movements are fantastic. And believe me, I would tell you which tracks I really liked. I think I wrote down maybe the numbers of them. No, I didn't. I fucked up there. But since the language barrier prevents me from actually telling you what tracks are really awesome on here, I'm just gonna say the whole album, because there wasn't a moment in here that I didn't enjoy. I would go as far as to say this is probably the best death doom album I have heard this year. And I mean, I've listened to a fair amount of death doom this year, and I've listened to a ton of death metal, of course, but God, this is just magnificent. The atmosphere is both haunting and woeful, and then absolutely fucking pulverizing at times. Great drum work, and generally with like death doom, you know, that's one of those genres where you don't talk about the drum work very often, because generally it's, for the most part, very slow and very lethargic. But the drum work in here is really well done. Lots of like fun accents on the riffs, and the riffs are so goddamn catchy. And it's so fucking heavy. Like, Jesus Christ, this is like just sonic fucking cement being poured into your ears, but in a good way. The breakdowns are absolutely punishing. Even towards the end of the last track that I can't pronounce, there's like some really haunting, almost like Gregorian chants. It kind of gives it this giant like swell of gothic atmosphere. Yeah, everything about this album is awesome. don't be surprised if you see it on my year-end list. Don't be surprised if you see it on Jam and John's too, because while I was listening to this one, I had to link it to him, and he was like, dude, you have to check this out. And then he proceeded to gush for about an hour after listening to it about how awesome it was. So if you're a big fan of Hooded Menace, Morbid Angel, Sepulchral Curse, kind of similar to them too, check this album out. Check out all their stuff. Everything that this band has put out so far has been awesome. But yeah, this might be the best yet. Messa Close. This is the third album from this Italian doom metal occult rock act. It's kind of hard to say what this band is in terms of like just like one flat out genre, especially with their new album, The Spin, which was my first exposure to them, and absolutely love that album. I still jam the shit out of it, and I obviously loved it so much that I wanted to get some more. And this was actually recommended to me by Rick over the Dreadful Minutes, who is a doom connoisseur like no other, and he said that this album was quite a bit different than The Spin, which The Spin in comparison to this is definitely more hook centric, more like kind of like classic rock vibes in there, and even like some post rock stuff. This is way more experimental and outright a lot heavier in spots. There's a lot more going on in the way of like atmosphere and transitions on here, like sections of like Middle Eastern music and like, you know, hand percussion, and then of course big like doom metal sections. But here the metal sections feel way more metallic than they do in the new one. Like the new one is definitely heavy, like it has almost sort of like a witchcraft sort of vibe, which I do need to get that new album. That one totally went under the radar for me. But here it's a lot heavier. Like the guitars have way more bite and way more sizzle. The big consistent between the two albums though are definitely the vocals. I love her vocals. They're sultry, they're a little bit raspy. She almost kind of has like a ghostly Grace Slick sort of quality to her vocals. I don't know, I just flat out dig them. But yeah, back to the album being different, because it really is. The songs are notably longer on here overall. And I don't want to say it's like more dynamic, because The Spin is very dynamic. It's just dynamic in a more, I don't know, reserved sense. Like the only thing that I felt like kind of went like off the grid a bit was probably the whole lounge break in the dress, which was fucking awesome. Here, there's more of those moments where it kind of just takes these wild turns in terms of like stylistic transitions. Like Orpheles has like a really cool sax section on it, and like some clean jazz slash like jazz fusion guitars. Again, the Middle Eastern accents in here, especially at the end of Pilgrim. There's a lot more going on here, and, you know, again, in comparison to that last album, I feel like they kind of, you know, stripped it down a little bit and made it maybe like a little bit more accessible in a way, like, you know, not so, oh man, this maybe avant-garde's kind of the right word for some of this. It's still packed with just like big rockin' riffs, lots of Sabbathy stuff going on too, but this album is definitely bigger in a sense than the new one. And I dig it almost as much as the new one. I don't know, I kind of favor that one. That was my first exposure to the band, so I might favor that one a little bit more. But this one is a different animal altogether, and honestly, I need to get the rest of their albums. If they're all this good, then I'm 100% on board. If you're a big fan of, I mean, like Witchcraft is probably one of the big comparisons I could make. Witch Mountain, maybe. But again, there's more going on to this music overall. Just trust me, check it out. This band, I can see why there's so much hype about that new release. And I'm already looking forward to getting more in the future. So yeah, check them out. Sacrifice, 1986-666. This is a comp, I believe, of all of Sacrifice's demos. The Exorcism demo from 1985, Forward Determination demo 1986, and Soldiers of Misfortune 1989. I believe this originally came out in 2006, and this is a reissue from the Metalhead box that actually features a couple of bonus tracks, some 2009 re-recordings, and this is Sacrifice. I absolutely love Sacrifice. They've become kind of one of my favorite thrash metal bands from Canada in general. Like, I still love Razor. Razor's definitely a bit more one-dimensional than Sacrifice, though Sacrifice I don't know. I feel like you can call both of them the Canadian Slayer, and they'd both be like, yeah, I know, that's cool, that's fine. And since I have all the albums that these are demos of, I'm pretty familiar with this material. Though I did, you know, of course, listen to it, check it out, and these are definitely the more raw, underproduced versions of them. It does sound like they cleaned them up a little bit. The first demo, honestly, it sounds like a live show. Like, it sounds like someone, you know, just held out a, well, I mean, it would be like a tape deck or something like that, and just recorded the entire show and like, boom, that's our demo. But yeah, it was cool hearing the raw versions of like all these killer songs. I mean, For Determination, that might be my favorite, but I really love Soldiers of Misfortune. Those first 3 Sacrifice albums, legit, you can't miss. You're gonna get killer thrash out of each one. You're gonna get killer thrash out of that new one, which I finally got a copy of. So yeah, I kind of knew those were no miss, and this is more of a novelty overall, I mean, because I'm not like a big demo listener, but you know, credit where credit's due. These demos are really solid. Now the re-record tracks on here were pretty damn solid too. Like, they just kind of wanted to do some older tracks with some more modern production. And honestly, you don't lose an ounce of the grit or ferocity of them, especially Burned at the Stake, which, I mean, that's kind of a favorite off of the first album for me. Yeah, overall, while it's, you know, again, more like a novelty, like I wouldn't say like this is a absolute must own, but if you're a big fan of Sacrifice, you know, you could definitely justify it. And as far as I know, this is a Metalhead box exclusive, so I think it's cool that Metalhead box is putting out, again, like exclusive content as far as the music too now. But yeah, Sacrifice rules. Check out pretty much all their albums. I mean, there's still a couple I'm missing. I heard there was a bit of a drop off after Soldiers of Misfortune, but I can vouch for Volume 6. That album fucking whoops ass, and those first 3 again, absolutely essential. But yeah, check this out if you get a chance. It's pretty fun. Tensacult, Untamed Revulsion. This is the second album from the Sacramento-based death metal act. Yet another one I got in the Metalhead box, and this was not what I was expecting. Like, I mean, with artwork like that, I expected some swampy, gross, you know, yeah, probably Lovecraftian, you know, death metal. And I kind of got that, but as soon as I, you know, turned this one on to jam it, I thought I clicked on the wrong album, because these are the most stoner doom sounding guitars I have ever heard on a flat out death metal album. Maybe death doom is kind of arguable here. There's a lot of slow, plodding, monotonous tracks with big droning riffs, but the guitar tone is pure fuzz. It doesn't have that like crunchy sort of like sizzle that you'd expect from, you know, a lot of death metal, honestly. You also have a very warm, fuzzy bass, like the opening track, which is not listed on the back here. That is inconvenient. Anyway, the opening track on here, it starts off like a stoner doom song in terms of even the style. Slow, plodding, droning riffs. It's got like a big Sabbathy sort of like underbelly to it, until you get to about like the halfway mark where it shifts over to like cavernous death doom. The vocals echo throughout this entire album. They're deep and, again, tons and tons of reverb on them. Dude sounds like a silverback gorilla falling down the world's deepest well. Now, as the album goes on, you definitely get some more death metal tracks in there that just sound like old school death metal, albeit with like a very fuzzy tone. It creates this weird contrast, and honestly, it made me kind of like dive into this album a little bit more because it sounded so different. And I have to think that stoner doom was definitely like kind of an influence they wanted to, you know, work in here, because they use the elements so effectively, and you know how they build in with like these big long atmospheric instrumental sections into like this heavy lumbering death doom, but it still has that weird kind of like cosmic stony vibe that you would get from like, you know, like Monolord or something like that. That kind of makes this a little bit unique, especially like towards the end of this album, because there are clean vocals that show up, and there's like some more clean melodies and such. Like, honestly, it's got some big melodic stoner doom hooks. So I don't know if like calling this death metal covers it. Like, and even calling it death doom, it feels like a very different breed of death doom overall, but I dig it. Like, this was a really interesting listen. I'm definitely going to be coming back to this one more. If you're a big fan of, man, like, I mean, like Hooded Menace, and I would say like Temple of Void, but again, also bands like Monolord and maybe even like Truck Fighters at points. Yeah, I don't know, it's kind of bonkers, but yeah, check this out. It's an awesome listen. Guiltless Teeth to Sky. This This is the debut album from this Seattle-based sludge, doom / post-metal act. Bit of a supergroup, I'd say, because it features current and former members of bands like Intronaut, Storm of Light, and Neurosis. This is also on Neurot Recordings, which was definitely one of the reasons I got this. That and Jeff over at Gas Mask and Hand Grenades talked this one up, and once I saw that Sasha Dernable from Intronaut was pretty much fronting this project, I was like, yeah, no, this is just going to get my money. And upon listening to it and hearing how dense and heavy and monstrous the mix was, I checked the liner notes, and lo and behold, we have Kurt Ballou behind the knobs, and my God, this is absolutely savage. It definitely blends all three of those styles I mentioned, but like in terms of the post-metal elements, I would say it leans maybe like a little bit more towards like ISIS in terms of like the drums and like the intricate patterns. There's a lot of really cool tribal rhythms and kind of like off-time stuff, which Sasha loves Meshuggah, and there's definitely like a little bit of it, you know, kind of, you know, just peppered here and there. But this is the kind of post-metal that thrives on like a darker, heavier sound overall. The guitars are thick and nasty. It's pretty much constantly heavy. Like you do get the occasional breaks for atmosphere and really cool build-ups, but for the most part this is just kind of on you. Like it has just like some visceral weight to it. The guitar work is very reminiscent of early Intronaut, like back in the Null and Void days. Lurching, very dissonant riffs, again, complex rhythmic patterns in there too. Sasha's like kind of like robotic growl kind of gives it also that like Neurosis vibe too. The slower, more menacing tracks for me really stood out. Our Serpent in Circle, just based on these big single chord droning riffs and some just groaned, agonized, very tortured vocals. If you guys aren't familiar with the band that I've probably brought up a couple of times, LLNN, it's a Danish post-metal group that I think is very comparable, especially on that song in particular. Same thing with Illuminine, which is a little bit moodier, but also scales back a little bit of like the tribal percussion and kind of goes for like a slower, more like monotonous rhythm overall. Long Blue Veil too, I love the pick slide accent and those just, again, lumbering, droning riffs, but none of this feels like very lethargic. It feels very aggressive at all times. Like this is a very dark, menacing sounding album overall, and it doesn't get into like some of like the lush, more atmospheric stuff that you would expect from like Cult of Luna or anything like that. This stays pretty much heavier than hell throughout. And most of the credit, of course, I would say goes to the band and just the music in general, but I gotta give like a little bit of like some credit towards Kurt Ballou's mix in here, because it is dense and impenetrable. The guitars and drums in particular, something about Kurt Ballou mixing drums, like the drums always sound absolutely amazing on his albums. But yeah, this is a fantastic release, and surprisingly not super long. Like again, you think like post-metal, you think drawn out songs. There is a song on here over 10 minutes, and I think it's like a little bit under 50 minutes in terms of like an overall listen. So this is pretty concise, but you kind of just get everything you want out of like post-metal sludge and doom on here. This is just dark and awesome. If you're a big fan of ISIS, Neurosis, again, early Intronaut specifically, like before they kind of got, you know, a little bit more proggy, like those first two offerings, Null and Void, very similar to this. Check this album out, and yeah, this is a really wicked super group, if we're gonna call it that. I think we should, and I look forward to more releases from them already. So yeah, check it out. Raging Speedhorn, Nightwolf, no relation to the Mortal Kombat character. This is the 7th album from this UK sludge / hardcore act. I've been a fan of these guys for a while, though it's been a while since I've actually picked up an album of theirs. The last time I snagged an album of theirs was back in 2007 with Before the Sea Was Built, which was a pretty awesome album. I just kind of lost touch with them. And then I saw this ridiculous Teen Wolf inspired album cover, and I was like, you know what? It might be time to revisit Raging Speedhorn, because it seems like they're still partying it up. And not much has really changed. Like, for the most part, I would say this album is a little bit more on the mid-tempo side. Like, you know, they had their faster moments here and there, like, you know, rowdy, they got some like good hardcore bite, but a lot of this kind of sticks in a good, just kind of sludgy groove throughout. Very similar to bands like 16, Lopan, Crowbar, I would even say like Orange Goblin, except like Orange Goblin with like hardcore in it. Beefy, high calorie riffage throughout, good growled and roared vocals. It's a pretty straightforward album. Like there's really not a tremendous amount of surprises on it. In fact, a lot of the songs, you could argue kind of have like a very similar song structure, but overall, I think it's pretty good. You do get a couple of good like up-tempo numbers, like Every Night's Alright for Fighting, DOA, and Coming In Hard, which I think that song features a banjo. I know it features some fun hand clapping. Like there's kind of like a light overall sort of like vibe to this. Like this is kind of like a good sludgy party album. They've definitely had that vibe on other albums too, but this one kind of feels like it's pretty continuous throughout. Like it doesn't sound like it takes itself too seriously. It just wants to deliver good riffs, good head-bangable grooves, and kind of stay fun. Hell, I even think like the main riff on the title track, there's a little bit of a nod to, I would say like Pantera's I'm Broken on there. Like it's pretty close. Like they don't play, again, like the entire riff the same because lawyers would probably be contacted, but it feels like there's like a deliberate nod to Pantera on there, which that's always cool. Again, little one note in the rhythm department on here, but still like kind of an overall fun album. If you're a big fan of, again, like a lot of the bands I mentioned, especially like Lopan, and again, I get that Orange Goblin vibe, but it's, again, like infused with a bit of hardcore. Yeah, if any of that sounds good, check this one out. Pretty fun album. Drudkh, Shadowplay. This is the 13th album from these Ukrainian black metal legends. I really wanted to go over this one in a review. We just didn't have time. And now I really wish we did because I liked the last one. I thought it was pretty good. I think this one's even better. I've been a fan of this band for years. Like, I would say probably the early to midpoint of their career. I can't remember the album exactly, but this was an awesome listen, except for, all right, the one thing, and of course it's the thing that's pretty predictable, the opening track is, it's kind of a long intro. Scattering the Ashes, which I'm sure has a lot of like symbolic value, but it is 7 minutes and 20 seconds of some fleeting melodies in the background and a lot of skulking through the forest. Probably on the search for riffs or synths. They didn't find them until you get down the song April. But for me, it kind of felt like a long period of needless exposition in a movie, or a really long establishing shot of, wherever the setting is. Like, oh, it's a haunted house movie. Here's 10 minutes of footage of the haunted house. We're just going to circle around it with a fucking drone and let you know that's definitely where we are. And then after a few more scenes, we're going to circle back to the outside of the house to once again show you that we have not left said place. But outside of that opening track, this album is fucking amazing. Beautiful, lush tremolo harmonies. It's cold, but it's very emotional. It's very powerful sounding. April, which I count as the first track in here, is absolutely beautiful. It storms in with stampeding drums and these lush, beautiful tremolo harmonies. The songs are longer in here, but they're very dynamic. Like, maybe not to the degree of like Dissection, but they know how to draw out parts and build on melodies really well. The vocals, I think, are great. And production-wise, this is so much better sounding than the last one. There was just an issue with the way the drums sound on that one in particular. Here, they sound natural. They sound very organic. The guitars have this great tone to it. But the biggest thing in here is I feel like this album just has like such a grand, epic sort of vibe to it. The XL in particular is just loaded with these huge, triumphant, soaring melodies. Absolutely giant-sized song with these really smooth transitions. It just stays like just kind of on the pulse of the writer charging into town on horseback, or whatever they're trying to convey there. That's really not their lyrical themes. Anyway, beautiful song. Same thing with The Eve, which is way more melancholic, a little bit more desperate sounding. Absolutely beautiful though. Like the scope of this album just feels so much bigger than the last one. Fallen Blossom and The Thirst are a little bit more blasty, a little bit more aggro and in your face at points, but I mean overall this whole album is absolutely amazing. And I don't know, man, this could be like a new favorite. Like it's been a while since like Drudkh has just absolutely blown me away with an album. Not saying that their albums haven't been good. I think honestly their whole back catalog is awesome. I can't think of a Drudkh album that I own that I did not enjoy. But this one just had me after the long intro, that is. That's the only thing I could really knock on. Everything else I think is done borderline perfectly on here. It's just the long intro that I feel like that really could have been shortened down. It's 7 minutes and 20 seconds. But yeah, outside of that, oh my god, this album's fucking brilliant. If you've never jammed Drudkh before, honestly, not a bad place to start, but honestly, I think you can kind of just pick an album and go with it. They've been like super consistent over the years, and again, I think all of their albums have merit, but yeah, this is something pretty fucking awesome right here. Comparable, I would say, to maybe Wolves in the Throne Room at points. There's occasionally some second wave-esque stuff on here too. I don't know, it's Drudkh, and I recommend just jamming them. That's pretty much all I got there. Alien Weaponry, Terra. This is the third full length from this New Zealand-based alt metal, groove metal act. Kind of hard to describe, but I don't know. I root for these kids. This is a very young band, and I like what they do, which they put a lot of their Maori culture into the music. I went over their last album, and I mean, all right, I didn't necessarily like it very much, but I still root for these kids to succeed because I think they have something unique to offer the metal world. And this one feels like kind of a turning point for the band, because the earlier stuff I would describe as like, and kind of more like groove metal centric, like very similar to like Soulfly, but also much like Soulfly sort of changing their sound and kind of bringing back more classic metal elements like, the thrash and like kind of like more classic groove metal, like getting away from the new metal sound. That's basically what I'm saying. Because I would say some of this band's earlier stuff has like, rings of new metal to it. This sounds more like melodic metalcore overall. That's definitely more the vibe on this album than it was on the previous two for sure. Hell, Randy Blythe is actually on here to kind of further cement that kind of mid-2000s sound. The production's way more crisp, the guitar tone way more thrashy and crunchy. Honestly, without the vocals on here, there are points in here where you could have told me that this was like an instrumental trivium track or something like that, and I might believe you. But again, this band is very young, and I feel like they're starting to like really kind of mature as songwriters, because I feel like, while the songwriting, again, kind of familiar in terms of like a particular era, I think it's better overall. Vocally, this band's stronger, both when it comes down to delivering like big like rock hooks and like more harsh stuff. And again, all the Maori lyrics on here, I like the inflection of their voice and how they deliver it. They have like katas and such in there, which I think is just, again, super fucking cool. But overall, they're broadening their sound. Like the opening track, Crown, has big thrash riffs on it. One of my personal favorites, Hanging by a Thread, is almost kind of like this like staccato kind of like groove metal sort of sound, like almost kind of Gojira-esque, but it has really solid vocal hooks, and you start hearing those tribal patterns come in, which that might be maybe a knock on here is, I think some of the tribal aspects kind of got pushed back in the favor of being more metallic in some points. Like a lot of those songs kind of pop up a little bit later in the album, and I think they're really good, but I think they could have shown up earlier on the album because it took me a little while to really adjust to the fact that this was the same band that I reviewed not too long ago. I think the straight up metal tracks are good. It's just, I think this band is at their best when they're blending a lot of these elements together and, legit creating something, arguably kind of new. Well, maybe new like thematically. Musically, this has definitely got its roots in stuff like Gojira, Soulfly, Lamb of God. Again, Trivium, maybe a bit of like Kill Switch Engage. There's definitely some big, bold choruses on here too, and they're getting better at the vocal department as well. But overall, I think this is a pretty strong offering. These kids are growing up and expanding as musicians. They're becoming better at the songcraft, and it definitely shows on here. So honestly, if you're a big fan of any of those bands I listed, and honestly, I would say like Soulfly kind of baseline, but this is like more later Soulfly than early Soulfly, if that makes any sense. You still have your tribal elements, but this is definitely more metallic overall. Then check this out. This is pretty damn good, and honestly, might be their best album so far. All right, next up we have a split here from Chaotian and Deiquisitor. This came out last year, so this was another split that I missed. Could have very well been on my year-end list for those. Now, something that I didn't know, and kind of disappointing, Deiquisitor actually broke up. I didn't know they broke up back in 2023, so I believe the 4 tracks that are on here from Deiquisitor are, you know, some of the last tracks that they actually put out. Now, both bands are from Denmark. I've become a big fan of Chaotian, in particular. Their last album I thought was fantastic. It was just loaded with visceral, disgusting, old school death metal with twisting, angular riffs. You know, a lot in the line of like Incantation, Dead Congregation, Cruciamentum, stuff like that. And that is exactly what they brought on their 3 songs on this split. After you get past the oddly very like 1950s, early 60s sci-fi intro to their side, you get into just these twisting, disgusting riffs, amazing drum work, great fills, great accents, deep, menacing, fucking demonic vocals, a lot of savage, old school death metal riffs mixed in with like twisting, angular riffs. The production on their side, I think, is great. Their Discordant Flesh in particular, it sounds like a long lost Morbid Angel track. Loved everything about their side. Now, Deiquisitor, again, I didn't know that they had broken up and that this was their last probably offering, I would say. Like, I think this is the last thing listed for them, at least in the archives. And honestly, they kind of sound like there were some bare bones songs. Now, this band definitely changed their sound over the course of their existence, and the later stuff definitely had like some more, I would say, like technical or proggy sort of vibes to it. I think song Elitist Technology definitely has some more technical riffs to it, but I don't know, these songs, again, they feel like that was what they had left and that was the last thing that they could really contribute. Like, they didn't want to release it as a solo EP, they wanted to release it with another band that was a part of their scene. And there's a part of me that feels like these songs were a little par-baked, like not really a big fan of the drum sound at all. It just sounds odd. And I know this band was a 3-piece, but I feel like the guitars were like kind of thin, like, you know, more single track, like they really wanted to show that they were a 3-piece. But at least on previous releases, there was definitely more body to the guitars overall. I didn't hate their side or anything, but it was definitely the weaker of the two. To Be Human, I thought, was a pretty cool instrumental track. It's got some really interesting, very poignant samples in there to kind of keep with the theme of the song. But yeah, overall, this was really good, but I mean, you know, Chaotian kind of just won this one hands down. Not that it was a competition or anything, but yeah, their side is the side that I'll probably return to the most. And in terms of Deiquisitor, I will probably go back to their earlier stuff that I really enjoyed. But again, if you love bands like Cruciamentum, Incantation, Morbid Angel, Dead Congregation, I'll even throw in Hyperdontia too. Check the split out, pretty solid overall. And finally, we have Reckless Manslaughter, Sinking into Filth. This is the 4th album from this German death metal act. I got into these guys way back in the Screaming Toilet days when we were doing reviews for them. I went over their last album, Caverns of Perdition, which I thought was really awesome, and interestingly enough, that is the opening track on this album, Caverns of Perdition. It's just kind of strange how that works out. And yeah, this is some more old school, kind of just straightforward death metal. Lots of heavy asphyx and like bolt thrower worship. It's very groove laden overall. A little bit, you know, kind of on the Death Doom side, but it's again like more of that asphyx style of Death Doom where you get like, you know, D beats and 2-steps and these chuggy ass riffs, and then they kind of slow into those dronier parts. The guitars are huge, they're crunchy, big bellowed growls, good balance of like more up-tempo kind of thrashy stuff to like more groove-laden, just old-school death metal pummeling. I gotta say, some of the faster tracks are a little bit more brutal than I was expecting, like Befouled Commandments, Awaiting My Demise, Action 1005, and The Sacred Lie. There's just like a little bit more like brutality to some of the riffs and tremolos and such, and that might have something to do with how the drum sounds, because I don't know why, because it didn't show up on any of their other albums, but this band kind of went with like that brutal death piccolo snare sort of sound, and I don't like it. I really hate that snare sound, and it feels really out of place for this style. Like, yeah, if this was like a brutal death, you know, slam band or something like that, totally fit, and I would still hate it. But here, with like that old school kind of vibe that is, you know, on most of this, I feel like it just needs to be like a good solid thwack with like, you know, a good amount of reverb on it. Especially with the more slow, menacing stuff like the last track, Risen from the Mass Grave. Probably my favorite song on the album. Like, it is about 10 minutes long. It is a Death Doom banger. Great dynamics in it. Love the riff changes. Like, everything about that song is flat out sick as hell. except for that damn snare. That's the only thing that I just didn't like about this, but it was by no means a deal breaker. Like, this is just, you know, tons of hefty, disgusting riffs. And it's one of those that if you like old school death metal, and especially like Bullthrower and Asphyx and any band that loves those like flat out double time grooves and that kind of like, you know, stomping over fucking dead bodies sort of fucking vibe. Yeah, pretty sure you'll dig this. I would probably recommend the album before this more so than this one, but I still think this is pretty decent. It's still got that meat and potatoes aesthetic that I like about it, and yeah, it's just a fun listen. But yeah, if you like any of the bands that I brought up there, and again, you just like meat and potatoes death metal, check this one out. Pretty damn good. And that will do it for another collection update. And I am already working on the next one, and trying to just get caught up with all the stuff I got, because I haven't even got to the stuff I got in Maryland yet. But yeah, I'm going to be working on those because I want to get caught up with all the stuff I bought. But if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They were only 99 cents, and our Lone Perk is doing a members-only live chat, which at some point we're going to do. I don't know when you're going to see this. You might not see this till July. I don't know. We might have already done our members-only thing and are thusly working on the next one. Either way, membership's the main way to support the channel now, and if you would like to join up, there is a join button down below, and all you got to do is smash it or hit it, or I wouldn't recommend spitting on it. I don't know if that would trigger it, plus you get spit all over your phone or computer. I don't recommend that. But if you would like to join up, that'd be awesome. Either way, we appreciate the living shit out of you, regardless if you join and become a member, or you just choose to be a subscriber, or you just, you know, like to come by and hang out on the channel. We appreciate all of it. Again, this has been one of the most fun things I think I've done with my life, and honestly, I can't picture my life without this channel now. And a lot of that is large in part to you guys. So yeah, we are forever grateful for everything you guys do. Hopefully we've gotten around to doing a ranking or a greatest hits video, or both. Schedule's a little wonky right now. But either way, you guys are absolutely awesome, and we will catch you later.